عندك شغل معمول بس. Okay, good evening everyone. We're going to start the lecture now. So the slides are on Z-Things. You want to participate? Let's get going. We'll pick up where we left off last lecture. So we were talking about management challenges, like related to big data, so big data management challenges. We talked about security, we talked about privacy. So now one of the challenges that's very pressing, especially like after the acknowledgement that big data and like the privacy breaches, the security issues are causing lots of inconvenience for users. So that's pushed regulatory bodies to come up with some laws and regulations to properly govern big data. So hence we come to compliance. So in terms of compliance, like there is several definitions of what compliance is. So but basically it is conforming to a rule, a law, a legislation. So in terms of, okay, and organizations are obliged to follow that rule, to abide by these set of regulatory guidelines so that they make sure that they are not in breach of contract with their customers and with the regulatory bodies such as governments or other authoritative institutes. So with compliance, like it's more application or industry specific, because like for each area there is no general big data compliance. There is GDPR, which is like an initiative by the European governments so that they can govern data better. But like when it comes to specific data sources, like let's say for health, like HIPAA is the the compliance, like the organization, that they have guidelines of how healthcare information or healthcare data need to be governed, how they need to be stored, how they need to be managed properly, so that as much as possible all the health information of customers, the health information of citizens, in this case because HIPAA is a United States initiative, so in that sense, what are the health information of the citizens of the United States, how the information is preserved, how it's managed, how it's transferred, how it's shared. So there are things that like more specific, because here the health industry or like the health regulatory bodies consider health information very important, very private data, and hence they have certain set of rules in that regards. So like on the other hand, like the European Union, they come up with also data management like regulation. So in terms of how the information of people in Europe, how the information is stored, where is it stored? Is it stored on European land? Are you using a data center that's in another country? What are how the information is being transported, how the information is being preserved on site? Is it encrypted? Are there some measures that would preserve privacy, would protect that information from third parties or illegal access? So the GDPR has a lot of controls of what you can do and you cannot do, who should have access to the data, who shouldn't, where the data resides. So, and like for them, in order to, even like for HIPAA or GDPR, the way that they make sure that organizations abide by these guidelines, these compliance laws, that they have really heavy fines in terms. I remember for GDPR it was somewhere around 3% of the global revenue for organization, something like that. So if you look at for organization as big as Google or Facebook, like even if you look at 3% is not that big, but if you say from the global revenue of Google, that's like huge amount of money that they need to pay if they are in breach of the GDPR regulation. So like depends on your organization, the organization you're having, the organization you're being the manager for the big data, you're being the big data management within the big data management team for that organization. You need to always be aware of what are the compliance regulations. Are we in breach of any of them? Are we really protecting our customers? Because that's may cause lots of trouble for your organizations if like there are simple rules there are simple controls, little controls you're not abiding to, that may cause like hefty fines to be paid. So, and when like this is from regulatory bodies side of view, so they have regulations you need to follow, but also there is the side of your customers. So whoever is consuming your service, whoever is consuming your data, whoever is like providing that data on your platform. So there is like a well-known concept in that is the service level agreements, in terms that you and your customer, you as a provider and the customer as like someone consuming your service, you have some sort of contract, an agreement of what can be done and what should not be done with my data, who should see it, who would be able to access it, how, like in terms of general, like availability. So how available is my data? Can I access my data all the time? So this is more like a contract between you and the customer, like you as an organization and the customer as a consumer. So you need to always keep that in mind in terms of, okay, how can I need to always make sure that I comply with that service level agreement, because if you are in breach of contract, then definitely also comes to like they can sue you, they can that would affect also your reputation, as in terms of you are not following what you have promised in your service level agreements. So now it's like with big data, it's even more challenging, because when you're looking at availability of data while it's in large volume or in fast pace, so you need to make sure that, okay, is what you're promising in your service level agreement is within your capabilities. Because like now it's more like, okay, there is a huge amount of data. Am I promising the customer that they can, if they query my data, that they will get the response for their query within 10 seconds? Or is it something that they need to query, if they need to request a report, then I will generate that report the next day? So these things definitely matters for the customer. So you cannot say, because you need to be specific in that terms into how fast can they access the information, what's the availability. So if you're doing bad jobs, like let's say over the night to generate reports or run analytic services. So if you're doing that over the night and they are trying to access the data, so you need to also define as, okay, during these hours we're doing bad jobs, so you cannot access data or you cannot use these types of services. So this way, in the service level agreement, you are already highlighting what the user can do and what they cannot do in terms of the agreement between you and them. So, and also like when it comes to big data, you need to also always respect the quality of the data that you're offering. So here quality becomes very important, because if within the service level agreement you're promising accuracy of certain limit or specific in terms of granularity of data, you're promising this granularity of data, and then you do not comply, then also this is a breach of contract that can cost you it can cost you big fines to be paid for your customers. So performance, as I mentioned, in terms of how fast, because sometimes like with big data, it's not as small databases. No, they can have 24/7 access, and when they are querying, the input is going to come to them depending on the speed of the network. Because for me, internally, it's very fast. But when we're talking big data with parallel processing, and especially depending on the technologies you're using, that might not be the case all the time. So you need to preserve, like, okay, do I need to do these kinds of tasks within a bad job? Do I need to, like mention, okay, request the report and the next day you will get the result. We will send it to you when it is done, and providing them some notification of how fast you can work. So at the end, it's all about what both of you agreed on, you and the customer, you as the provider and the customer as the consumer, and hence everything should be clearly indicated in your SLA, in the service level agreement. So like when you're so there are some things, like when you're designing your SLA document, so there are some things that you can say, okay, these parts I'm not gonna govern by, this is out of scope because I'm using a third-party service. So that's also fine. So, and at some level, there are some things that you can acknowledge that they are out of your control. So I'm using a third-party software, or I'm using a third-party service to do this. I cannot guarantee like these kind of things, but I can give you a range. So as long as you highlight what's the extent of your capabilities and what you can do and you cannot do, that's also that make it sufficient for the consumer. So like here, when you highlight that all these, like for this infrastructure, this is out of scope. So you are highlighting within your services these kind of things that you cannot control, you're using third party. So you're highlighting as out of the scope of my SLA. So as long as you're clear, transparent to your customer, that's fine. It's not necessarily that you need to be in control of everything, even the third-party software. Definitely, like when you are talking about you're using another service, external service, you need to also have an SLA with them, because you need some sort of contract when you're using that service. But nevertheless, if there is some room of like changes that you need to protect yourself by mentioning that these are out of the scope of my SLA. So there are some languages and some notations for defining SLA. So for like specifically for web services, like we have the web service level agreement. So it's mostly like it's also a simple notation in terms of identifying, okay, who are the parties governed by this service level agreement. So what are the products? So hopefully like for you, you have some catalog for the products. So what can you offer using your data? Are you going to offer analytical reports? Are you going to offer querying this data? Are you going to offer? So in terms of what services on top of big data or like on top of your data in the organization you're going to offer, and hence for each of these services, what is the parameters that you are going to ensure that they are there? So speed, availability, what exactly? And so in terms of what you are obliged to do. So in terms of security, are you going to offload security and you say, I'm giving you a bare bone implementation. It's up to you to install any security software or any security controls that you're comfortable with. Or are you take that to the next level and you say, no, actually we are managing security on the platform, so we are encrypting all the data, we are having proper access control, and hence we are taking that and you can offload this controls for us. So depending on what you are trying to do and like what you are offering to your customer, how they can consume the data, what they can do with it, what are the analytics service you are offering, you need to highlight everything as a product in your service level agreement. So this is the notation here just for creation of the service provider, service consumer, because like it's more like a documentation, just like to highlight everything, because later on that document will be passed digitally into other systems in order to communicate. So you need to define every party, define the product. So this is just an example. Don't look at it as you need to know what each part means, but it's like fairly clear, like XML, showing you what's the provider, what's the consumer, and so forth. So now we talked about compliance. We go to further into data governance. So for data governance, governance is more like an umbrella expression. So it's not bounded to specific thing in your data, but it's more like organizations, enterprises came up with the expression because they wanted to create more like internal bodies in their organization to make sure that this data is managed properly, to make sure that it is secured properly, it is preserving privacy. So that's why they create like governance body, governance councils inside their organizations to highlight, okay, this is the authoritative body that is responsible for managing the data. So if there is any issue, if there is any compliance update about some regulatory laws, you need the governance departments in that sense need to push these rules, need to push the implementation of these rules in the organization. So it's more like about like how they make sure that it's secured, how to make sure that it is usable, they ensure that this data that you're offering of high integrity. So in that sense, it's more an umbrella high-level expression for well management of the data inside the organization. So when it comes to quality, the Data Governance Council, they are responsible for making sure there is high level of quality. So how they can develop strategic like actions that they can improve in order to leverage this data that that the organization has. How they can make sure that the data that they have, each part or each department of the organization, each entity within the organization can leverage that data and can draw insights that's useful. So data governance here is more the high level view of like the council that controls data within an organization. So now it's like this is also part of how the challenges regarding data management in an organization. So previously, when it was like the data were small and like you can allow consumption through small APIs, and then I can integrate my data between my organization and another organization, which can improve the value of the data. So two different organizations, the one of responsible, like for, let's say an example, eBay here is responsible for selling the goods, while on the other hand, DHL is responsible for delivery of these goods. So in terms of if you want to share the information between the two organizations, for small data sets, that's easy. Like if they want to do statistics, that's relatively easy. But once the data grow bigger and bigger, that becomes challenging in terms of the volume of the transfer data. So that's not sometimes it's not cost effective to transport the data over like usual means of small, like normal data connection, like with gigabits of transportation speed. So in that sense, that also you need to think about the volume. You need to think about are the data in terms of schema, are they compatible? Is there need to be translation between the schema from this organization to another? So these things are also pose an additional challenge in terms of how you make sure that this larger volume of information, when shared from one organization to another, you do some steps to integrate this data to make sure that it's usable for them. And also an additional challenge in that space, when you're sharing data, there are things might be sensitive for the users, and for eBay users, there is some financial data or some information that they consider sensitive in terms of I don't want to share my address, so I highlight it as sensitive. So there are things that's also of sensitivity of the data itself, and when it's come to sharing, that might cause an additional challenge. If you share the data, how you anonymize it, or how you mask the sensitive part before sharing, so that you minimize any risk that if the information is passed from one organization to another, there is no issues. So this brings us back to compliance. So when it comes to compliance, there are certain rules of what you can do with the data from regulatory bodies side of you. And there is some rules in terms of the SLA. So within the SLA, did you say that I'm going to share your data with third parties for statistical purposes? So also you need to respect that. It's not no, the data is on my server, I'm free to share it with whoever I want to. That's not the case, because you need to respect regulations, you need to respect the SLA, you need to respect privacy rules as well. So in terms of what you can share, what the users allow you, what they consider sensitive private information. So for us, now we preserve the data, we made sure that we comply, we made sure that we are not breaching of any contract, we're not breaching of any regulation. But when it comes to big data, that's the larger it is, the faster it is, the more variable it is, it becomes big data also come up with more big expenditures. So it's costing organizations, because storing the data, that means you need some infrastructure to do that. Transporting the data, you need fast network to do that. Protecting the data, you need some sophisticated, more fast parallel processing capabilities that allow you to encrypt and decrypt the data on the fly without affecting affecting performance when you're dealing with the data. So all these things means more cost for the organization. So you need to look at, okay, what's the trade-off in terms of, okay, I'm preserving lots of data, but is it from return of invest side of view, is it worthwhile for me? Or am I just hoarding data and I'm paying lots of money for that without getting anything back? So looking at alternative in terms of how you're storing, if you are allowed, and let's say for GDPR kind of thing, they do not allow data to be outside of Europe. But let's say for other countries where there is no such regulation, then you can think, okay, yes, I'm gonna outsource, I'm storing this on a data center in another country, which might be cheaper. But always keep in mind with with any decision that you make to cut cost, am I breaching any regulation in terms of what am I allowed to do? Where can I store my data? So with each step of managing your data or working with your data, there comes more expenditure with the increase in the size and the speed and the variety of the data. So when acquiring the data, that means definitely specialized tooling. When you're storing it, when you're analyzing it, cleaning it, that's also like when it comes to big data, that's more cost for you. You need to make sure that you cater for, and you need to make sure that you have what it takes in order to invest in these tools and these technologies that you can keep your data useful and at the same time make it cost effective for you. So you don't want to spend a lot of money on preserving data or analyzing data that's not returning anything on the other side. So zero return of invest, you're just spending money. So within for big data, it's related to the properties of the data itself. So volume is making things cost, speed, velocity, variety, veracity, how you can invest in techniques that you can improve the quality of the data. So this also comes for specific applications, that's very costly, because here you're applying these techniques on a larger scale, which requires much more processing power and hence more money as well. Visibility as well, like preserving the privacy. And at the end, it's all about value. So if there is some good return of invest, so you're investing here, you're expanding your infrastructure, you're paying for more resources network-wise, you're paying for more tooling, but at the same time there is more customers, they are purchasing these services, subscribing to these services, then yes, I have value for all these things I'm investing in. There's some return of invest, so I'm free to add more, enhance according to this. Okay, so and an additional aspect of big data management is data ownership. So previously, before the how people become aware of privacy issues, it was trivial in terms of, okay, yes, the data is here on the server. I'm happy to share it on Facebook. I want the visibility. But as people become more aware of privacy issues, as there are more malicious malicious actions that made use of these data for some questionable purposes. So people become more aware that, okay, where is my data, who have access to it. So the data ownership has become important in that sense. So when you post something, is it yours or does it belong to the platform? What can the platform do with it? Can they share it? Like, can they use it internally or can they share it with a third party? So the ownership of the data itself become relevant. And at that point, when you're creating this data, whether it is like you're doing a post or tweeting about something, so data accuracy also become a thing in relation to ownership. So if you're creating fake news and then people are retweeting or reposting, then you're just like at some point you're causing harm. So you might be liable for that. In terms of monitoring that data, also like, okay, who can monitor data accuracy? So Facebook from their side, as an example, they monitor posts by people, and on a regular basis they say, okay, yes, we can flag that as a fake news, we can flag that as a scammers, we can flag. So they keep like shutting down accounts, like removing posts according to this. In that term, like Facebook is investing lots of money in that area itself, because not only they need to, like, imagine for like a vast majority of people, if they need to look at the content created by everyone and then decide, like, is this fake news? Is this like scam? Is this someone who's trying to abuse other people? So in that sense, everything needs to be processed and like quickly, because you cannot say, yes, there is fake news, and after 3 months you flag, yo, that's fake, that was fake news. That's useless. So they need to do that on a timely fashion, or when it is relevant, stopping that from spreading or stopping any abuse before further harms happening. So even monitoring the data and like in that terms, and whose that data is owned by is very important. Okay, so back to the big data life cycle. So we looked at data challenges. So what are the V's related to big data? So volume, veracity, velocity. So what are the challenges regarding the data itself? And then we looked at process challenges. So in terms of processing the big data, so what are the other challenges in terms of cleaning that data, storing that data, acquiring that data? And then we looked at management aspects. So how we preserve privacy, how we secure and protect, how we comply with regulatory bodies, how we make sure that there is some sort of service level agreement, that we respect that, how we make sure that we monitor ownership. So in terms of data management. So this is like generally the data life cycle with any organization, give or take. So if we look at, okay, in the big data life cycle, which area the technological advancement is yet to mature to address the challenges? So we've seen like for each of the areas in the like big data life cycle, we've seen like for data, for processes, for management, there are different challenges. For like definitely there is some advancement, technological advancement in each area, trying to resolve or mitigate these challenges in order to make sure that, okay, organizations are easily managing that, they are getting value. So if we look at it from that point of view, from technological and tooling and methods and techniques, what are the things that's like which areas that are still lacking, like they are still need more investment in these areas, versus what are the areas that's more advanced? So which one is still you feel like within the talk from last lecture and today that you feel that, okay, no, I think this needs, it's not mature yet, or at least it needs more investment in that area? What's the result? Oh, okay, so they are, it's arranged according to the importance, 1, 2, 3. So now we have the number 1 is management, second processes, third data. Now processes in the lead. So can anyone care to share some comment on that? So what do you think, why management or why processes, and why data is considered like we have good advancement there? Can anyone share anything? Just simple comments. You don't have to go in depth. Oh, so you played it this way, that this course is about management, so it's definitely management is the first. That's a good approach, by the way, but like maybe we can think about it from what we've learned in the past lecture. So like we mentioned, like these challenges, and we talked previously about, like, let's say Hadoop ecosystem. So what are the things that you see, okay, yes, this came along, I've heard this term before, but I cannot see like lots of advancement in that area. I think this needs more, or at least currently I'm hearing lots of issues. People are talking about, okay, we have this, and still an open issue kind of approach. Can anyone share? So now we have management in the lead. Whoever voting for management, do you care to say a few words why management is still lacking, in your opinion? So there is no right and wrong. There is nothing like, I'm not going to say, no, wrong, yes. This is more like discussion kind of thing. So, because there might not be a solution. So it's not like, it's not, there is no, is this better or is that better? Yes or no? Are we right or wrong? This is more discussion kind of thing. So within the past lecture and today's lecture, we talked about challenges. What make things like look like they're, okay, we might need more technological advancement here. Why? Because I've heard on the news that this is still an open issue, or this seems have a lot of challenges in comparison to others, and hence probably that's because it's not yet addressed, something like that. Yep.
Is it because processes in Java involves, is about the information that you're doing, whereas management involves a lot of uncertainties?
Yeah, so that's one way to look at it. So in terms of, like, if you're wondering what she was talking about, so when we look at management, there are a lot of uncertainties when it's come to, okay, this, because these certainties come from human in general. So in terms of, okay, what we consider complying, what we consider complying to SLA, how we define the service level agreement properly, how we define ownership, how do we make sure that, okay, yes, I can measure the accuracy of my data and hence provide the service level agreement of I will provide you this level of accuracy for my data. So there are, within the management aspect, there are a lot of things related to people, because they are managing the like the big data, And still there are some ways that it's still being done manually. And that's why it's creating some uncertainties which is require further advancement. So this is one way of looking at it. Does anyone have different opinion or complementing opinion? Yep.
In relation to the Facebook example,
Mm-hmm.
I think data ownership is still a huge issue that is being unresolved because fake news has had a huge impact on the election and
Mm-hmm.
it's still happening again and they're still fixing it, but there's no.
Yep, that's like definitely an issue, that a huge issue now, because when it comes to, okay, Facebook is responsible to look at all the content created by the users in the platform. And at the same time, they have obligation to make sure that there is no harm because of this content, because they are disseminating this information all around the world. So at some point, okay, we need some way that we monitor this information, make sure that it is accurate, it is not harmful. And at the same time, what we, like when it is a huge amount of information, like billion of people using Facebook and they are creating content. So it's very challenging in terms of making sure that on a timely fashion. So I'm detecting this is fake news and I'm reporting on that in the minute. It doesn't matter if it happens after a week because the harm could have been done by that time. So it's definitely challenging, and it is still, Facebook is struggling with this. They are doing advancement every day, little by little, but they haven't said, we have found the silver bullet of fake news, stopping fake news. So definitely that's something related in this, which is management of and how making sure that like organization managing data better. Does anyone else have any other opinion, similar opinion, complementing opinion? So you can see like management currently is in the lead and it seems it's staying this way. Is there anyone can argue otherwise, saying, no, I don't believe so? As I mentioned, this is discussion. I'm not going to say, yes, you're right, while this guy is wrong. No, there is no such thing. Okay, so since like we reach saturation rather than we stay there. So like my personal opinion, as I mentioned, this is more opinion, like there is no right and wrong, is also management. So it is related to a lot of areas that are still in terms of how we are used to managing them on a smaller scale. So I know that, okay, for this, like the SLAs are kind of clear way when we're talking services, when we're talking small website, but when we're talking bigger, larger sets of, like a service relying on a larger set of data, then I might not be able to specifically highlight what I can offer. On the other side, ownership, it's very hard to process everything in order to identify is that accurate or not accurate. Like also one of the most pressing matters when it comes to big data is security. So when it comes to security, like because with big data and like depending on how you are protecting that data from malicious parties, now it's become very difficult to make sure that, okay, I'm still providing good performance for accessing the data versus, yes, I'm protecting and I'm using sophisticated encryption in order to prevent malicious party to access it. So there is still some research in that area, how we can search data without decrypting it. So there are people creating indices that can, like you can search the data, find the query before decrypting. So it's in the encrypted format, and I search and I found the result, then I decrypt to provide the details. So like this requires lots of investment in indexing data in order to still preserve privacy, still make sure that the data is protected, nobody can understand the whole bits and pieces, but at the same time I can find useful information that I can take and then only decrypt that portion rather than decrypting the whole database in order to do the search. So there are a lot of things, specifically in security, that need further and further, because like there are things that's still in research area but it's not yet in production. So it requires further let's say advancement there. This is definitely, like as I mentioned, this is my opinion, because there is no right and wrong. There could be some other lecturer who will say, no, I totally disagree, data is this. So don't take it as, no, the lecturer said this. This is my opinion because I see it that way. Okay, so we'll go through some big data management do's and don'ts. So we don't have much more slides. I'll ask the question again. Do you prefer 10-minute break or get out early? Early? Okay, work for me. So for big data management, when it looks at what are the things that's more like recommendation, what you can do and what you can don't, we have a look at some of the strategies that you can think of when managing big data. So when it comes this is most a pressing issue when it comes to big data. So people think it's like, oh, I have a large volume of data, I have it fast, I have it this. So they start to be ambitious. We can now create some really valuable service. We are going to do this. Everyone will love us. So that's the thing is like, okay, being ambitious is good, but thinking of it step by step on smaller scale to larger scale is the right approach. So don't try to do everything like within this, like processing big data. I want to draw insights about customers' trends. I want to draw insights about cash flow from one branch to another. I want to do this. I want to do. So they are all good to put in your mind on the strategic level, but you need to start with, okay, let's start with this, where we can rely on this portion of data and we can rely on this amount of processing units, so that you are managing cost as well, and at the same time experimenting to see what can work, what you can actually get from data. And like maybe you find out that there is some issues with the data quality. So maybe like when you're starting smaller scale, you can detect these issues early rather than trying to look at everything and generating insight about everything, which can cloud your judgment and say, no, I'm getting this because it doesn't matter even if we have low quality on that part because we are getting something else good. So that's okay, you can generate some revenue, but at some point you are losing resources because you're investing at something that is useless. So pick the right project that you can test the capabilities of your organization. Because like with big data, like not all organizations are equipped with tooling, expertise, knowledge to deal with that. So also like you need to keep that in the back of your head in terms of, okay, what can I do in order, these are the things that I know that we have good developers in this, we have good business people in that. So I can start with this project in order to gauge what we can do with this portion of data. Can we generate insights about customers that want to purchase further items, or who's pulling out of the our platform. So starting small then going big is the right way, rather than going all out at the same time. So another thing that you should not do, so don't focus on a particular business unit, even if you do not have a good use case. So you're thinking, Nana, I have some people here who are good, but you say, okay, and like it would be, I can rely on them to do this and that, but you're forgetting that, okay, within this business unit, within the data that you have, you cannot generate some useful insights. So you need to think on a larger scale, okay, thinking globally, not implementing. Previously we said implementing small and grow big, but now when you're thinking, you need to think on an organization level, what would be best that I can do for the whole organization and that I can start with, rather than starting with some business unit that's not gonna pour in the greater good of the whole organization. So it's always like useful to start with things like, how can I decrease risk? So this, because it would benefit the whole organization rather than only small units. So if I want to decrease risk, if I want to secure my organization, if I want to prevent harm, or I want to, let's say, improve my storage capabilities in order to preserve my products better. This can benefit the whole business units, the whole organization, rather than focusing only on, okay, let's look at the employee's salary and how much we want to increase, or let's look at how many people are leaving the platform in that sense, and to like how we can attract new people. So looking at it from a global point of view, and then what can benefit the organization, and starting there might be the right choice, rather than for you to go with like specific business units and stuff. And like even when it comes to when you're starting with specific business unit and you're trying to generalize to others, it might be hard for you, because like what's specific here cannot be generalized. But if you think of, okay, let's think risk for the whole organization, then when you're thinking about risk in storage or risk in, let's say, logistics, then things can be mapped. But the other way around, when you're thinking risk in logistics specifically and then trying to generalize for risk in the whole organization, it may not map cleanly. Another don't when it comes to big data management is, don't think that, okay, no, I know that if I just install Hadoop, then I've got everything covered, because Hadoop is the magic platform for big data. So don't assume that technology alone would guarantee that you will get what you need. Technology is definitely relevant because it simplifies, it helps you acquire the insights that you're after quickly, faster, but it's not the only thing that you need to think of when you're devising your big data management strategy. So things like you want to look at, okay, what can I leverage from the current technology, rather than that if I install this new technology that I'll get. No, let's contact Google and ask them if they allow us to access their cloud for big data analysis. That's definitely like on the long run, if you reach a point where the cost benefit of outsourcing or using the cloud becomes better. But if you have some infrastructure that you've used, and then you say, okay, I can, that's what the beauty of Hadoop, that you can install it on commodity systems, and they say, okay, let's start with Hadoop on commodity systems, and then we can later on advance to other technologies. So new technologies is not the target that you need to go after. So it's not like big data management strategy, let's install this new, or let's contact Google, let's contact Amazon. It's not always about the new technology. It's about, okay, starting with what we have, and like in that sense you can ensure that there is some return of invests rather than just going all out, fancy name for product or fancy name for a technology. So one thing that you need to do in terms of big data management strategies is think about the people in your organization. So, okay, within these people, because it's big data management is not only IT. So don't think of it as it's an IT solution and then we have data scientists and then that's it. I don't need anyone else. That's a wrong way of looking at it, because this data is generated by people, maybe that's like either they are domain experts or it is like monitored by these domain experts. So for them, when they are looking at your data, they are the better people to say, what does it mean if there is a change from this to that? What does it mean if there is like decrease or increase in these parameters? So people are more like the people in your organization are important. So always aim for, okay, how we can have a buy-in from everyone in the organization for a big data management solution. If I'm trying a new technology for this, rather than I just go, no, let's just contact IT. Hey guys, can you do this? Contact Google, let's do that. And then whoever on the business side, they are saying, no, this is totally useless. We don't know how to use it. I'm going to stick with the old ways. So if you don't have buy-ins from the people in your organization, then probably even if you create the most awesome tool, if they don't use it, it's useless for your organization, and you're just invested money or wasted money on useless tools. So this is related to what we mentioned in the beginning. We're starting small. So sometimes because it's tempting when you're talking about big data, so you think about, okay, I have lots of data, I'm gonna use it to solve many problems. So you're trying to tackle unknown problems with unknown data. So you're just like, oh, let's collect everything and then we will use it to make America great again. That doesn't make sense in the sense, okay, what is the problem you're after? And what are the bits of data that can help you do that? So don't try to solve unknown problem with unknown data. Know what it is, like, okay, preferably you start with a known problem. So we are having an issue with people, there's a fraud and financial fraud in the organization, like whether it is a financial institute. So we are losing money. So the problem is that we're losing money because of fraud, but we don't know how is that happening, or from where is this related to specific areas in the world? Is this specific to time of the year? Is this specific to some platforms, like people who are using Google Chrome is more susceptible to be hacked, as an example? Probably it is not. If you're using Edge, probably you're susceptible to be hacked. But there are things there are small bits of data that can help you. So once you have your problem, okay, we are losing money because of fraud. How can I prevent that? So hence you start looking at what are the bits of data that you can use in order to innovate and find that, oh yes, I've detected that all these fraud instances came from this specific area of the world. So probably they have found something, or they are using there's some sharing for a tool that can help them with this, or they are there is some spamming, like phishing campaign that they have used previously, and they got some information about users, and hence they are doing some identity theft. So there are things that, like, once you have the problem and then you glue the data that's relevant to this, and you start innovating, and then you go little by little of more discovery. So after, like, you solve your known problem, and then, okay, no, I'm familiar with the data now, I'm familiar with what are the problems relevant to my organization, and then you start looking at, okay, how can I innovate? How can I discover new use cases? How can I discover an innovative way to improve? So now, when you are in discovery, you are more into, you don't have a specific problem, but you want to enhance the revenue of your organization. So in the beginning, start with something you know, using data that you know. Then a little by little, you can innovate in order to solve new problems or discover new patterns that can help you achieve better revenue for your organization, and so forth. So one of the important things as well when you are talking organizations, when we're talking big data, is always to think strategically and act tactically. So in that sense, it's also relevant to how you start, how you think about projects. So rather than rushing, building platform that's would be useless, and like your organization don't know how to use it, or it doesn't prove to be fit for the use case that you have. So you need to think on a higher level, on organization level. So what are the things useful for the whole organization? What can I do step by step? Build a good strategy in terms of, okay, if we look at this, we resolve these things. If we protect ourselves, we make sure that the data that we have is protected, so that you don't rush into things and, let's say, rather than, okay, let's share it with Google, let's outsource it to this API and do some analytics, rather than rushing and doing things ad hoc and on small experiment that cannot generalize. Think on a bigger picture strategically and act into a plan, according to a plan that can help you eventually achieve better results, rather than thinking about small things that here and there. So strategic goals are important in terms of, okay, let's increase revenue, let's protect our customers, let's attract more users. So there you're thinking on a higher level, general strategic point, and then acting directing your effort little by little according to what can help in that area, rather than limiting yourself to just let's install this technology and see what happens, or let's build this platform and then we see if we get anything from the data that we have. So always think strategically, but then put a plan to act according to this plan little by little to increase and then utilize the best of your big data. So just to recap, we looked at data, we looked at data challenges, properties of big data, process challenges, what are the things, how we can clean it, how we can improve it, how we can analyze it, what are the, how we can integrate it with other data sources in order to get better value. And then we looked at also challenges in terms of management, how we make sure that we comply with regulation, how we make sure we protect, how we make sure we preserve privacy, compliance, how we make sure that we monitor ownership, we monitor the accuracy of data according to the owners that they generate the data. So all this fills in within the big data lifecycle that you need to think of when devising your big data management strategy. So this help you with, because this is important for organizations once they decide that, okay, yes, we are gonna be, like some organization, they say we are going to be a data-oriented organization. we are going to be data service organization. So some like this, because it's becoming a hype, more of what's big data. Everyone is making money out of big data. So there are a lot of organizations that their asset is data, or they are acquiring data and trying to generate some revenue out of that. So when you're like part of such organization, it's not only about technology. It's not only about installing Hadoop and then doing processing and then generating insights. It's also important to devise a strategy for big data management, how you make sure that you're not falling into, okay, you're working hard, you're generating an awesome insights, but at the end of the day, you are hit with a big lawsuit and you lost all your revenue. So devising a good big data management strategy can help you prevent that and can help you get revenue and like you at least keep that revenue for some level rather than spending all of it on the technology. So you're getting $1 million, that's awesome, and then you're spending $1.2 million on the technology. That's not awesome, because if there is no return of invest, if you're losing money investing on technology and you're not getting returns of anything, you're not getting revenue to overcome that investment, then it's a losing business. So having a good strategy, how you're building things, how you're managing the data, how you're protecting your customers, complying to regulations, make things much better for you in order to have a successful big data service, or a company that's more like have the big data as their bread and butter. So any questions? So I released today the quiz for the lecture. So the quizzes start this week. I didn't want to start last week, so this week we'll start with the quizzes. I still haven't got the approval for changing the weight for the assessment activities. If it stays as is, then it's 50% for final exam, 15% for quizzes, and 35% for assignments. So assignment 1, 15%, assignment 2, 20%. If I do not get approval. If I get approval, then the assignment weight go up a bit and the exam go to 40%. Okay. So for the tutorial for Java for big data, I hope for the people who were attending are making use of that. This is not about teaching Java from scratch. We do not teach Java in this course. It's not a programming language course. But this is just a refresher for students who are feeling a bit rusty in Java, to help you in the labs for the core components starting week 4. So week 4, we start the labs related to the course. These labs are more like help for the people who are a bit rusty in Java. If there is no questions, then you are free to go and have a good night. Hi.